to double check. But yeah, I've always assumed that. I will look, like I said, into it though when the stream is finished. And I know, I'm pretty sure that's the way it's working, simply because I have no problem with performance on my machine, and I've done that many times here per environment, for instance. So the spawn box says, don't get him wrong, he wished that it was like that, and it would make so much sense. Well, yeah, simply because that's the way Max works, and most 3D software works that way, and in the past that's always the way I'm pretty sure it worked. Let's have a look. I'm going to let's do a Google search here for UE4 instance, or UE4 duplicate. That was in 2015. Montressier, good to see you. Thank you, Montressier. I'm glad you liked them. Montressier is saying that for duplicate you have to copy and paste. That's insane though. I mean, why give you the option to right click and duplicate if that's the case? I don't get that. Yeah, that's insane if that's the case. I always assumed by doing a duplicate, Control C, Control V, and I get what you're saying, Ant. What you're saying. Montressier says that to duplicate the object, you have to do Control C, Control V, copy and paste. Which to me makes no sense. If you can click an object and duplicate it, why call it duplicate if you're not actually creating an instance? Control middle click. Yeah, no, I know what you're getting at, Montressier. Montressier is saying you have to copy and paste to do a duplicate, and not duplicate. I'll have to look into this more. I've always worked under the assumption that doing an edit duplicate would make a duplicate instance of the mesh. Yeah, that's what I need to work that out too now. Now that you guys have been talking about it, I want to know what the difference between a copy and paste and a duplicate is. I always assumed a duplicate worked the same as in Max, where it created an instance of the original mesh. I don't understand why Epic would call it duplicate if that's not the way it works. Doing a copy and a paste to me would suggest that users doesn't create an instance, but doing a duplicate I would assume creates an instance. The spawn box is saying, but a true instance would not have its own material settings. No, if it's an instance, when you change the material on one of the assets, it would change it for all of them. And that's what's going to happen here. If I change the material for one of the tassels, it should change it for all of them. Yeah? Is that what you're suggesting, the spawn box? Because we can easily check that. So basically, no, you're not saying that, okay. I'm not sure what you mean then, Spawnbox. I was assuming you were saying if we change the material on one of them, it would change it. Yeah. Okay. Let's get this, let's sort this out. If it's an instance of the mesh and we change the material on the original instance we started with, or any of them really, it's going to change the material on all of them if it's an instance. If it's not an instance, it's only going to change the material on that one mesh, yeah? And you're saying if it's not an instance and I change the material on one of these tassels, it's not going to change it on the others, yeah? I just want to see if that's what you're saying, spawn box. Is this spawn box? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, let's have a look. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look then. Okay. I have my tassels in my blueprint. Okay. So we have our tassel here in our 3D. No, let's get out of the blueprints and get into the models. Let's have a look. Because I want to know myself, because I've always assumed the other. This is our tassel. And our tassel, I'm assuming, is instanced, okay? We have our materials on our tassel. You're suggesting if Unreal uses 3 types for instancing. But are you saying if I change the material here, it's only going to change the material on the first one and not the rest of them because they're not instanced? And you're saying if I change the material here in the original model, that it's not going to propagate to the rest of these because they're not instanced. Is that what you're saying? If you change them, they will change the material for all of them because it will change the default. Which would mean that they're all instanced. Oh, are you suggesting because it's changing the original mesh? The material on the original mesh. See, these are our materials here in our first tassel in our blueprint. You're saying if I change the material here, it will not change it for all of them because they're not instanced. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to work out how we can change the material for one to see if it propagates to the rest of them. Or not. Because, yeah, no, it's something I want to find out myself now. Yeah, Montressier says it'll change it all. That's what I thought as well. Sorry, I don't know why the spawn box, your message was deleted. It's been out of... Yeah, you have to be careful. Don't post a link in chat because you will get timed out. You've got to be a subscriber or a regular like Montressier or the guys that were following my channel before my subscription button went live. You regulars can post chats, but if you're not a regular, you can't post in a link in chat. You can post a link in my Phildoes 3D server though on the Twitch desktop app. If you install that or use it, I have a Phildoes 3D server there which has a chat room which, as long as you're a follower, you can post a link in that. You were linking to the instance documentation. Okay, look, I should be able to find it. It shouldn't be that difficult. UE4 instance. Because, yeah, no, this is something that's quite important just for the engine. So, instance materials, instance tools, per instance ID for static meshes. I'm just trying to look for one that's not 2 years old, that's a bit more recent. But if you do want to post a link, the spawn box, you have to follow the channel, but if you join my Phildoes 3D server on the Twitch desktop app, if you use it, you can post a link in that. Just type !server, SERVER. It'll give you a URL to click on, an invitation to join the Phildoes 3D server. That goes for anybody watching. Actually, if you want to join the server, please feel free. Just type !server, SERVER in chat to get the link for the invite to join the server. There's a general chat on the server that if you're not a subscriber or a regular, you can post links in that. But I really do want to find out what's the go here. What's the Epic doing here? It's not a material I'm looking at though. I'm not concerned with instance materials. It's meshes. Instance meshes versus static meshes. It's not really what we want. Let's have a look here. Because I know when I was using the UDK it was this way, and I know that because I did a profile on the level that I created in that, and it showed the amount of instances. Okay, so let's have a look here. Spawnbox says, okay, so when you use multiple of the same mesh, via the content browser or duplicate, that model and material are cached. And that speeds things up, like I'm saying, okay. However, each copy would be its own draw call. By doing real instancing, you turn 80 draw calls into a single draw call. I understand what you mean. The memory footprint would be the same size. Yeah, okay. So that is so that is duplicating. So the spawn box is saying when you use multiple mesh instances, multiple objects of the same mesh via the content browser, or duplicate, which is what we've been doing, the model and material are cached, which speeds things up, but he's saying it doesn't decrease the draw call. Right. Then in Unreal, if you wanted to do a true instance, in other words, reduce the draw call, is that a copy and paste now? I always assumed a copy and a paste would be worse than using a duplicate. See that's basically what the spawn box is saying is duplicating, going edit duplicate is going to use less memory, but it's going to not reduce the draw call, and the draw call is every time the engine loads up the material, and so the more materials you have on an object, the more draw calls you have for that object. Spawnbox says no, to reduce draw calls you would either merge the meshes and create a new static mesh, or do real instancing. I'm gonna have to look it up after the stream. I don't know. You're saying do real instancing. Explain to me in Unreal here how you would do a real instance. And let's use one of these tassels as an example. We have our curtain and our tassel. We want to instance this tassel all the way around. How would you instance this original mesh if you didn't right click and go duplicate? Would you copy and paste? So I think what this... go into the blueprint. Okay, all right, let's have a look. This is our original blueprint here. Well, this is the blueprint we created from the curtain. So I am in my blueprint, the spawn box. We have our static mesh components here, which are all of the tassels and so forth. Yes, I see all of the components making up that blueprint, yeah. So these are all of the tassels that we've got along our curtain. Each of them is going to be a draw call, okay. What you can do is click on add component. Instance static mesh. Where's instanced? Am I missing something here? Well, I'm trying to look. Let's have a look. Okay, we have our instance static mesh here. So you're suggesting to... You're suggesting I place my static mesh components within this subfolder. I'm just trying to work out if that's what you mean. No, so when you click that now in the list, instance static mesh, yeah. On the right hand details panel, yeah. You get to choose the mesh and click a plus button to add instances. Oh, okay. So you're suggesting here now but I can't do that post after it's already been created like this. Why are they doing it like this? You're talking about here. So doing a duplicate the way I've just done it, still only reads the mesh into memory once, but reads a draw call for every copy of that mesh. So it increases the draw call that way. A true instance, which is what the spawn box is saying, and I think this is what you mean, won't increase the draw call because it's going to completely just use that first mesh. So it's going to use the first mesh, geometry, and material. It's the material that increases the draw call. So every time a material is loaded into memory, it's one draw call. Well, it's not one, but material loads are instant draw calls. I'm just trying to work out if we can convert the ones we've already got in here into our array of meshes, instance meshes. Because it's an important thing to look at for speed of an engine. With each time you add a new mesh, it's 2 draw calls. Okay, fine. 1 for the mesh and then so many per material, that's right. But it still should be reading the mesh only as 1 draw call and then, well, 2 draw calls. And then an extra draw call for every material load for the copies. Even if it's not a proper instance, it still shouldn't be doing 2 draw calls for each mesh. It still should only be reading that mesh in once as a duplicate. That was what the impression I always had from the Unreal docs. Yeah, all right. I'll look into this after the stream properly. Yeah, I will. I'll look into it after the stream and find out exactly what Epic Games are doing with their instancing versus duplicating versus copying and pasting. They're making it much more difficult than it really needs to be if that's the case. Yeah, the spawn box says it's loading material changes and stuff. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. I will look at the documentation after the stream though to find out exactly how Epic are handling all of this now. It just seems like a very convoluted way here for Epic to create a true instance in their engine if they want you to do it through Blueprint. This seems silly. Spawnbox says that hierarchical instance static meshes are basically how they handle foliage. Yeah, okay. I will look into it. Because yeah, it's an important thing for an engine to be able to instance geometry to save poly counts and memory and speed up the engine. My assumption was always doing a duplicate of an object was instancing it the same as every other 3D software on the planet so far, apart from maybe Epic Games. I'll find out. I'll look into it. They may be doing it this way through Blueprint to allow them to do something script-wise with the instances. Maybe that's the reason they're trying to do it this way. To me, it seems more complicated than it needs to be. If this is the way that they're choosing to do it through the Blueprint. But I will look into it. After the stream, I'll go through the documentation and check it out. But I see what you're saying here. They have a component called an instance static mesh. Well, it may make sense, Spawnbox, in a gameplay sense. Like I said, maybe they've done it to add... Doing it this way, they could script instances. They could do stuff with scripting, which is fine if you want to script an asset. But if you don't intend to script an asset, you shouldn't need to do it through the Blueprint. Doing it through... Forcing people to do it through the Blueprint is making their engine more complicated than it needs to be for people that don't want to script an asset. Blueprint was created for scripting and to script assets, to make them dynamic, to make them move, to make them change color, do all of that sort of stuff, which is great and useful. But there are instances where you don't need to do any of that with a mesh, with one of your assets. So forcing people to do it through the Blueprint, in my opinion, I'm not as smart as the guys at Epic Games. I'm sure there are reasons they're doing it. Just as making it more complicated than it needs to be. You should be able to choose one or the other. Like, choose to not do it through the Blueprint, but you can't script your asset, you can't change anything about it, or choose to do it through the Blueprint where you can script your assets, you can do whatever you want. Like I said, though, I'm sure they've got their reasons for doing it this way. The Spawnbox says, where instances as a single draw call would mean that all instances would be at the same LOD, regardless of if there are any in view or at a... Okay. I get what you're saying. He's saying by creating an instance, if you create an instance of an object that's back here and an instance that's here, where the camera is or where the player is, the engine can't LOD the one in the background because it's an instance of the one in the foreground. So if it LODed that one, it would LOD this one and so make this one look low res, near the camera, near the player. I get that. And that's if you have an instance using a single draw call. I get that. Okay, so I think what the Spawnbox is saying is Epic have chosen to do it this way so that you don't accidentally create an instance of an object that's going to be further away and closer to you, because that will mess LODing up. Then Spawnbox says, but obviously for something like this curtain, this is not a problem. Yeah, and the savings are great. I agree. So the reason Epic apparently have chosen not to do it like other 3D software is because they don't want an instance in the background and in the foreground, and that stops LODing. And LODing is really important to speed up an engine so that, stuff in the background that's hardly seen is taken right down to a really low poly. Doing an instance that way would cause the one in the foreground to also go low poly, which would look crap. But as the Spawnbox says, because we're using so many tassels here that are never going to be seen all together at once, like on the curtain, we can use instancing in that regard because it will LOD correctly in the background when we move away from the curtain. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Unless I reuse this curtain somewhere else a bit further down in the level. You know what I mean? Where I could see the curtain here and say I had another curtain in the background here, that could cause a problem. I'm not planning on doing that for the level, but I can see what you're saying. I will look into that though after the stream. What do you mean no spawn box? What do you, because the second blueprint would be its own, okay. Right, okay. But, so if I duplicated the blueprint of the curtain that was instanced, because it's a different blueprint, it would still load correctly. I get it. So basically saying that Epic have chosen to put instances in a blueprint so that it will load correctly if you reuse that blueprint in other parts of your game level, as opposed to just doing an instance in the engine outside of a blueprint that could cause loading problems between one in the foreground and one in the background. Yeah, and yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. Basically, the way I've done it here, then, it means that this is a blueprint, but not a true instanced blueprint. It's still only going to read the one, as far as I'm aware, the one tassel into memory, but it's going to create a draw call on the rest of the tassels. I'm going to have to look at the documentation to find out what they're getting at, what they mean. I understand what you're saying, spawn box. This is like a partial instance then, where it's not a true instance of all of the draw call. Yep, okay. I understand. I know what you mean. I will look at the documentation after the stream, and we'll pick up. I'll be back on Monday next week. We'll pick things up then, and hopefully I'll have a better handle on how Epic Games are doing this now. But I understand where you're coming from. To do a true instance geometry with draw calls, so the draw calls aren't increased, poly count isn't increased, you have to do that through blueprint, as was pointed out here, by using an instance mesh and doing it that way. Instance static mesh and adding it through here. That will decrease the draw calls and also decrease the footprint for the memory for the poly count, and allow you to duplicate that blueprint further back in the level without worrying about problems with loading. Okay. Doing it this way though will still give us the benefit of reducing the memory footprint on the initial load of the asset. Swarmbox says there was a Victory plugin for the engine that allowed you to grab a number of the same mesh and press Ctrl plus L or I to turn them into a single instance also. Okay. We'll look into it after the stream, and I'll get back to you guys on Monday next week. Yeah, it's just, I can understand Epic's reason for doing it. I still think it's making it more complicated for people to instance their meshes than it needs to be. If we look at Max and the way Max does it, and this is the way it should be done, in my opinion, we have our asset here that we want to instance. I hold down the shift key and drag to create a copy. Max gives me this option, copy instance reference. That's the way it should be done in Unreal. Now, it's not done that way, and I can wish it was done a certain way until the moon turns blue. Spawnbox says, trust me, he agrees with me, it's a pain in the ass. I agree. It is a pain in the ass. That's the way they're doing it, that's a major pain. It should be done this way. When you do the copy, you have an option to choose what you want. And because I wasn't doing a true copy and paste in Unreal, I was always under the assumption it was doing it like this. It was creating an instance by doing a duplicate. Now, if that's not the case, and it's obviously not, obviously you have to go into the blueprint and create an instance static mesh component and add your instances to it. That's a pain. So yeah. Anyway, but I'll go over the documentation between now and when I stream again on Monday next week, and we'll pick it up there. Let's finish getting this curtain placed so that we can get this hallway looking a little bit more decent. Now I've just got to make sure I'm positioning these curtains correctly here. Now again, I'm just going to point out the roof here is using parallax mapping. It's not actually it's just a flat plane. It's just giving the illusion of detail with the parallax map. And that's things for like ceilings and floors are really good for parallax mapping. Just to get off subject for a minute. Let's get these curtains placed though. Now, I think what I'll end up doing is I'm going to place the curtain just below the border here on the wooden border on the roof. But I do want to make sure that the shear is the right size. I think it should be alright. But we want to move them back so that they're as far back as we can get them without actually going through the ironwork. I'm intersecting my ironwork a little bit down the bottom here, so I'm going to pull it forward just a bit more. Right. Thanks, Spawnbox. I'm glad you like the artwork. Yeah, if anyone doesn't know who I am, you can check out my website, Bill Does 3D. It's got some of the stuff that I've created in the past there. I'm going to move this curtain over into the corner. Again, I will look at all of the instancing, duplicating, all that stuff when I come back on Monday next week. Between now and then I'll read up on what they're doing. But yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you like my artwork. Let's pull that down just until it touches the no, it's too far back. Just until we get to where that column is there, that wooden column. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this blueprint and we'll work out what's going on with our duplicating instancing, like I said, next week. I'm going to transform this on the Y. It was great to see you too, Montresseur, in chat, so thanks for popping in. Alright, now I'm going to shrink these shears back a little bit because I don't want them covering up my gateway. So I'm just going to scale them in a little. And there we go. Again, we're not going to get proper lighting until I do a rebuild on the lighting, and I don't do that on stream just because it takes about half an hour. Now that I'm using my network and with the spawn agents, I think Epic are calling them, to do network rendering, it should speed it up, but I only set that up yesterday and haven't tested it properly yet, so I won't do it on stream until I do a test of it. But I'll do a rebuild on the lighting after the stream now, and when we come back on Monday next week, we will have a better idea of exactly what's going on. But I think our hallway here is pretty much done apart from the furniture and plants, which we're going to tackle after we've finished doing the rest of our level here. So once I've finished fixing up the interior of the building here and the rest of the level, the furniture and the plants are actually the last thing to do. So we will do those last. And I'll do a rebuild on the lighting and then look at whether this floor is too shiny. But I think we may leave it there for today, guys. I do want to thank you very much, though, for popping into chat and for saying hello. And thank you, Spawnbox, too, for well, thank you for the follow. That's always appreciated. And thank you for that talk about instancing. I will check that out myself between now and Monday next week when I'm back on streaming again next. I stream on a Monday and a Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific time in the United States. I will be back on again, like I said, Monday next week. If you're not sure, you can follow my Twitter page at BillDoes3D. I always post when I go live to Twitter. Again, I really do want to thank you guys very much for popping in and saying hello, and you guys that have been watching as well. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. You guys have a great weekend. Again, I've got a lot of work on at the studio, so I'm going to be pretty busy doing that. But you guys have a good weekend. I'll see you guys again, hopefully on Monday next week. Take care, guys.